Λοιπόν, προτείνω να ξεκινήσουμε την στρογγυλή τράπεζα.
Let us start with this roundtable. Good evening. Thank you to all of you for being here, for being with us until this hour. We have approximately 1 hour. I would therefore like to ask the panelists to be very specific and to be brief in their answers. I would like to welcome the President of the Technical Chamber of Greece, Mr. Spirtzis. Mrs. Despotidi is not with us. I would like to welcome Mr. Theophylaktos, President of the Center for Renewable Energy Sources, Mr. Papadopoulos, who is the Vice President of the Mechanical Engineers and Electrical Engineers Organization, and Mrs. Karavasili, who is the President of the CISD. I don't think that I have omitted anybody else. The rest of us, we have been up here since this morning because we were the conference speakers. There are two things I need to say about the topics we discussed today. We started with a general discussion about planning and the environment in which we are working. Christos Spirtzis spoke about this. We spoke about the strategy and the plans that a country like Greece should have prepared. And we went on to discuss more specific issues such as building physics, thermal bridges, the city aspects, dealing with materials, etc., etc. I will not repeat what was said throughout the day. I would like to propose that each of us takes the floor for 5 minutes. Each of you can speak about the topics that I will propose now. First, the ethics in dealing with energy strategy in a country like Greece. Number two, I would like us to discuss the tools that are available to us, which will help us to deal with unemployment and sustainable development. And with these, I think we can go around the table and start the debate. I would propose that Mr. Spirtzis is our first speaker. He touched upon an important issue, management of the situation, the way that an engineer works, and of course the ethical aspect of this profession, this professional activity. Mr. Spirtzis.
One of the main sectors, to my mind, that we need to change, or rather structure in a better manner. I mean, we can't expect things to change overnight, but gradually we have to look into, once again, the code of values we subscribe to, we as a community of technicians and experts, which means that we need to stop avoiding to take pains or work hard. In other words, for years on end, we were practicing our professions in ways that were not exactly honoring our professions. And this is the main reason why the society overall has a negative impression about our professions. We used to just handle dossiers and deal with documents, all sorts of documents, not just investors or customers of ours. In the dossiers, you would find other things as well, not just documents and legal papers. So in the past, we opted out of getting more training. There's still a number of our peers who think it's a waste of time to attend any seminar or workshop whatsoever. There's still yet another part of our colleagues who believe that whenever they receive their license through the Technical Chamber of Greece, then it's over for them. They can spend the rest of their lifetime doing nothing else but practice their profession. They believe that they need no further certification. They shouldn't take any exams whatsoever after they are licensed, and that's it. All of the aforementioned needs to change, and in order for us to make a change, we have to change ourselves, which means that we have to be respectful of our science, of our field of work, of our profession. We first need to show respect to ourselves and our peers. We need to just assume our share of responsibilities instead of just avoiding and evading things. And we shouldn't go on claiming that although we don't have the necessary skills and qualifications, we can sign papers and get documents approved. For instance, I do believe that still, when we ask people for low fees, when we give low quotas, then we're not respectful of our profession. We shouldn't discount our own profession or other quality of work. We have to ask for a fair price instead of asking for low prices for the sake of having a clientele. This is part and parcel of our change, of us changing and us growing and being mature. But this should also be coupled with a change in the legislative framework, and unfortunately, to my mind, there is no forthcoming change to the legislative framework. So far, as it turns out, there are ideas about draft laws or legal provisions, new ones for that matter, but the main rationale behind them is just the market and achieving a market price or bringing more revenue instead of providing quality of services. For instance, for 3 years now, we have been talking about deregulating our market, and so the government did away with the minimum amount due for payment to engineers. But there were 3 proposals made to the ministry in order for people, you see, there were people who also objected to using the term energy auditor. So there were 3 proposals with a view to doing away with that. Moreover, a set price, a fixed price is there when it comes to energy auditors providing services. It's €1 per square meter. It is a shame. You see, now, whenever we are asked to make a study for any customer, there are peers of ours who insist on asking for lower prices, even by 80% lower than the average. And there are others who claim that the Technical Chamber of Greece is in charge of checking on the quality of services provided by our peers, and they also go so far as to allege that we should be overlooking and overseeing the practice of our profession and making sure that we pinpoint those who ask discounted rates. I believe that the ministry could be the core, the backbone of growth and development for the country. I do believe that the ministry is a ministry that has scope for it to put things in order, a house in order, but instead the ministry right now is the epitome of corruption and lack of transparency. And this is quite relevant to our profession, I'm afraid. One last remark, if I may. I firmly believe that the Technical Chamber of Greece and the technical world of this country can impose changes such as the ones I've mentioned so far, just as long as we grow up, just as long as we are mature. Because if we eventually manage to give priority to ethics, if we indeed subscribe to ethical principles and forget about putting, or rather giving priority to the market, then we are going to make a difference. Thank you, Mr. Spirtzis. This morning we had a discussion on growth and development, and having a growth model which could set a shared platform that will bring together all the engineering professions and would also get on board all the stakeholders, be they private or public entities that are involved in the field of spatial planning, urban planning, our fields of work. And I actually think that this is very important. Having such a platform in place, to me, is critical, and it should, according to my mind, count on three parameters: the environment, the society, and the economy. It is important that they all be there. I believe that CRES, the Central for Renewable Energy Sources, could help out in that direction. So that is why I'd like to give the floor in the meantime to the president of CRES, Mr. Theophylaktos. How do you...
Thank you very much, Mr. Papadaniel. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Papadaniel has identified an important issue dealing with ethics when we are dealing with the energy strategy of a country. In the few minutes allocated to me, I would like to answer this question, whether this term ethics, which is a word that we have inherited from ancient Greece, has a role in the field of energy and in the strategy of any country. My answer is yes, because ethics, morality, is required when we design the energy strategy of a country. This is something which we owe to people living on the planet, we owe the future generations, but we also owe this. It is something which we individually and collectively owe to ourselves. But for any tool in order to achieve these objectives in a country which is faced with structural problems, financial and others, so a tool for that would be energy efficiency. At the level of the individual, we as individual users, we should act accordingly. We should also take care of what we do at the level of our neighborhood, of our state, and of the European Union. And let me limit myself to the European Union and not speak about the globe. 40% of the energy consumed within the EU comes from buildings, is consumed by buildings. 35% in transportation, and the remaining in industry. So the share of the industry is the smallest because they have done their homework. Industrialists, businessmen understand that what they save also from spending. But consumers need to realize that we need to save energy. And this I will not tire to repeat, that energy savings does not mean that we need to lower our living standards. Not at all. If we add to this the energy of the security of supply, which is also saving, and if we add to that the obligation of any member state to respect the treaty, rules, regulations, and directives, the Kyoto Protocol, for instance, and reduction of CO2 emissions, then all this takes us to the question of how can we achieve it. So I will follow on to what the president of the technical chamber said when he spoke about the engineers before the crisis. In my view, this crisis can become a tool, or rather the engine for a change. How can we convince the Greek engineer who graduates from university and wishes to become an energy auditor without exams? How can we convince them that it is only through lifelong learning can they remain competitive in today's world? Otherwise, they will be bypassed. I graduated in 1987. Nobody knew about PVs then. And the professor would tell me, be careful, $10,000. Now prices have gone down. Things have changed. And today at that time, we had 10 megabytes at the university. It was an important thing. Now we have gigabytes in our pocket. Lifelong learning is important, not only for engineers. Professor Aravandinos gave us a couple of examples today, and I personally discovered that I had made some mistakes in my life as an engineer, and Aravandinos solved this problem for me. Mea culpa. So, it so happens that engineers and technicians install the insulation materials. They need somebody to inspect them all the time. They make mistakes all the time. So we need to become accredited, and we need to educate ourselves all the time. The Brits, the Americans, the Germans, they are not foolish to have credits which are collected by learning, attending seminars and courses. We need to better ourselves, all of us. We need to learn new things. And of course, the level of courses and seminars has to improve as well. There's many things which we need to do. Despite the crisis, this new energy saving directive is very important, is a great opportunity, is identifying a number of issues: cogeneration, community cooling, community heating, energy audits. Our country needs to be prepared to get ready for that. And this will happen at our own level, at the level of the engineers. We must avoid becoming the laughingstock of Europe. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Theophylaktos. So I now gather that it is much more important for us to convince people, to convince the individual, than to impose on them. But in order to achieve this, my friend Claude Roulet will say that we need to impose because that's how humans are. But if we start convincing people from the kindergarten, from the elementary school, if we are able to set up a university that will transfer these values and provide all the information to young students, then things will be much easier. So education has an important role to play here. In this respect, I would like to welcome Mrs. Kivelou from Pantheon University. I don't know whether you've been with us all this day today, but could you please tell us what your views on this issue about education of students and how we can make them understand the need for this energy saving. This is not a matter for some mad ecologists, but it's an important issue for all of us.
Thank you, Chair, and pray forgive me for being so late, but something came up. Unfortunately, I did not attend the entire conference, but when it comes to education, I could go on and on, because I believe that there's a lot we can do, and indeed, at my university, we've embarked upon some of this. Energy is indeed a field that is of concern to my university, and we try to educate and teach our students things about energy next to how important sustainability is, after all, because I think that everything is intertwined. Pantheon University is a university with departments for social sciences and political studies, so we insist on environmental quality, energy and sustainability. We are interested in spatial planning and master plans, proper designs for buildings, for neighborhoods, for entire cities and towns, and we're also interested in energy, always energy. There's always energy, and it concerns all of the aforementioned, which goes to show, or rather I believe, that education and training should be all-embracing. Of course, it is our priority, just like it is a priority for everyone to improve energy efficiency. It's also important to capitalize on renewables and achieve NZEBs. But then again, we can't cut off those objectives from everything else, which means that we also need to remember how important the comfort of the users is and their health and safety. Which brings me to Ashke, which is a high environmental quality model, and it's also a standard, and it's also important to remember that SDMEG, which is a Hellenic French union or association, we've developed the SDMED. It's very important. For those who don't know about that, it's very important, and it embraces several fields such as health, safety and comfort for the sake of the user. We're also interested in issues such as adaptability and climate change. Given all of the above, I believe that certification and accreditation are equally important, as important as education and training. When it comes to implementing and enforcing such standards and new mechanisms which we also need to remember that these are not new. I mean, financing through third parties may be something new for Greece, especially when it comes to our building stock and infrastructure, but it's been there abroad for quite a while. Concerto is a program, and that run for a certain period of time, and according to its conclusions, optimization is important when it comes to energy efficiency, and optimization can be better improved when we are interested in a cluster of buildings, not individual buildings. Optimization is better when it happens in a bigger scale. For example, encompassing neighborhoods instead of buildings, and this is what is my message today. I also believe that CRES is working in an eco neighborhood in Agia Varvara, which is a suburb of Athens up north. So I believe that we have to have a wider point of view. Let's not stick to individual buildings. Let's embrace bigger clusters or complexes. Let's have units and chapters in our work, not units that are individual. Let's also insist on the environment, and let's bring the issue of energy into everything that we concern ourselves with. That's point one. Moreover, I believe that this is in line with the directive, because NZEB and the recast directive are quite important. There is on-site and nearby, there is mention thereof, and I believe that this is also encompassed in the directive. There have been reports and studies conducted in this field, the field of energy, and I believe that this is quite important to Greece because we want to get funds and financing. Greece, now that it's poor and there is social exclusion, still needs new buildings quite soon. I believe that given that we are more poor and we need to ensure social cohesion, since there's no social housing now, we will have to look into our options because there are people who are destitute and will be left without homes. So we have to do something about that. Let's find some sort of optimal combination for social housing and NZEBs. Thank you. I believe that what you said, Ms. Kivelou, is very important because it goes hand in hand with what you said before and we said before. It is important to have growth and development coupled with proper management of space and areas, and the economy, society and the environment are the fundamental parameters to do so. Previously, we also referred to information, how important it is. It has to go in every direction. And I believe we have Ms. Karavasili. She used to be Secretary General for the Ministry, IPK, or the Ministry of the Environment, and now she's President of CISD. She's going to elaborate on the work of CISD. You only have 5 minutes, madam. Manage information dissemination. How do you raise the awareness of people?
Thank you very much. Congratulations for an excellent conference. Once again, congratulations to the organizers. Mr. President, your questions about the ethical aspects of the energy issues are important. You asked me about a CISD, so what I have to say about it is the unavoidable follow-up of my previous activity, my own and with a number of my colleagues. We were fighting for sustainable development in this country, which unfortunately, despite the common use of the term, is non-existent in this country, is not, people have not realized it's important. And we believe that we have to have the economy, a collaboration among the economy, society and the environment. This year we have started the eco-energy campaign, which is running, being rolled out in every part of the country, and the idea is to create a debate about the issues related to renewable energy sources, to energy efficiency in buildings. We are trying to do away with the myths to promote the reality, the cost benefit of this for this country. If I still have some time, I would like to speak about the tools, a few very simple things before I speak about the ethics. We now have the tools in this country. We were late, but finally we did get it, both as far as the legislation and as far as the processes are concerned. In October this year, the European Union sent us a letter which warning us that we should proceed with the cost-benefit analysis in building renovation and refurbishment. Since the study, the survey that the European Commission is making in all 27 member states is showing that this new tool, the energy certificate is very important for buildings and for citizens. And it has been clearly stated that the more ambitious the goals are set, the greater the benefits in real estate. Let me just remind you that about 20 years ago, when we proceeded with the first incorporation of this transposition of the directive, we have spoken about the value of real estate. And we had said that the better the energy efficiency of a building, as shown on a certificate, the lower its taxable value should be. We were never, this advice was never heeded. Nothing has moved in this direction. The state still has a lot of things to do. I have been following this effort for the past months with great anxiety, and I don't see any progress. I believe that much still remains to be done. And in this case, as we heard from the previous speakers, a new ethos is required. The engineers should help in this. They have not done so to date. I was expecting that they should do so. I was expecting the energy auditors who go to every house should promote these ideas. Unfortunately, the crisis has become an alibi. We do nothing because of the crisis. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Karavassili. Following up from what you have said, I believe that we should give the floor to Mr. Papadopoulos, who will speak about the positions of the engineers in relation to these tools and the energy audits and energy certificate.
Thank you, Mr. Papadaniel. Let me first commend and congratulate my friends from ASHRAE. This is the second international conference they are hosting here, and I'd like to wish them all the best. Now, picking up from where the previous speakers have left off, let me refer to the challenges or even the opportunities that are there for our country in view of the fact that we need to enforce the new directive. And the new recast directive introduces two new features: near zero energy buildings, NZEBs, and these are given a very general definition through the directive. And so the respective member states are left with giving a definition themselves. Moreover, the cost-benefit notion is introduced also through the recast directive. Now, energy efficiency seems to be coupled or rather intertwined with the cost-benefit ratio of the building for the entire lifetime of the building. And it's clearly defined that should there be any benefit due to the energy investment, that benefit should amortize the initial cost, the maintenance costs, any decommissioning costs. To my mind, and I am a technical expert, I believe that we as technical experts and the Greek state need to take into account Law 41/22, which is the Greek law that transposed the European directive. And then we also need to remember that when we talk of cost-benefit, we are also including in this notion the costs and the benefit that concern the society of this country, the people. So there's need for studies and surveys to materialize there's need for one study to be made right now on energy requirements, given that things have changed and we're referring to NZEBs. So now we need to conduct new studies and take into account the cost for our society as well. Given the current situation and social and economic conditions we're witnessing, I believe that everyone agrees that this benefit, financially and economically speaking, needs to involve, first and foremost, employment and jobs. This is a time of recession, and at a time of a recession, it is important to make sure that all our studies and surveys foster employment somehow or create new jobs. I believe that this is feasible, and I can elaborate on that. But let me first just say this. Once we foster employment, then I believe that then the society will also support us, because right now the Greek citizens are sort of torn and they are not exactly convinced about the need of our work and what we are doing in terms of near zero energy buildings. If we show the people that we will foster employment through these new initiatives of ours, I believe we will win them over. My dear friend Christos, I'm sorry I got your name wrong. My dear friend Christos, I agree with you, we need to work on that. And that's what we're going to do. We, for our part, need to evaluate the materials we have. We have to look into what we're producing, what our country can produce. Whatever we produce here in Greece locally, and as long as it is standardized, then or certified, then we need to integrate it in the list of materials that may be used to achieve our plans, our objectives. And then again, there might be things that are not being produced here, but we also have resources that are not being utilized right now, and we could eventually get more production. Last but not least, we also have to look into what we cannot afford to produce as we speak. But given that we need to use certain materials, even if they are not produced here, then we need to capitalize on ways through which to get community funds. Provision has been made through the new directive. We have until 2021. So until then, we have to look into what we can produce. We can produce here and now, and what we can forthcomingly get ready in order for us to use it eventually. When it comes to structural elements and materials such as thermal insulation and all sorts of plasters, I believe that we have scope for production. But there are also pieces of equipment and infrastructure that will be needed and has everything to do with RES, because renewables are also referred to in the directive. According to the directive, whatever energy is left, or rather the rest of the energy, needs to come from renewables. And according to the directive, we also have, ideally, to make sure that we get renewables from within the adjacent neighborhood or the vicinity of the building. So we have to find ways to promote such technologies, directly or indirectly, to make sure that we have production in Greece. Hopefully, production will be will happen fully in Greece. But then again, we also need a national strategy for research and development, or rather research and innovation. And this national strategy must be integrated within the wider confines of our national plans for growth. We have to do something for that ourselves, and the Greek state needs to make up its mind soon. Once the Greek state is ready to do so, we have to be ready and committed to providing the human resources and all means so as for the transposition of the directive to happen and be in line with the current reality. Thank you. Mr. Papadopoulos, I think it's high time we give the floor to Mr. Peterson. In his capacity as presidential member of ASHRAE and chair of AASA, he had a chance today to find out more about how we look at energy in Greece and the energy sector. So we're looking forward to lending an ear to what you have to say, sir, especially as regards ASHRAE and how you have perceived what we told you today.
First of all, my congratulations to the Hellenic ASHRAE chapter on providing an excellent conference today to educate all of us. Ethics in engineering and what I was able to listen to today and talk to people in the corridors regarding the issues in Greece is very interesting. We have lots of discussions regarding ethics in engineering in the United States. I have to say that it involves, at first it starts probably with your client, then moves to your local community, onto your country, and then the world. And then we have a second ethical requirement, which is really the environment that's out there. All over the world, I think because we're an international business community, we're struggling with ethics in engineering. I believe almost 20 years ago, we started to see a divide in what I would call value engineering with what would be commodity engineering. Commodity engineering being provided by the lowest bidder to provide whatever the client was actually requiring. If we truly want innovation, the solution is that we as engineers have to stand up and educate not only the government, but also the general public on the value of innovative engineering in order to reach the solutions that we're trying to reach, to provide the energy directives that we have around the world. The U.S. is not much different than the European Union when it comes to having these same issues. When we look at energy, it's about national security and energy supply, both today and in the future. We're trying to change the way we're using energy and trying to get off of liquid energy supplies, moving more to renewable energy supplies, and even electric vehicles are becoming extremely powerful in California right now. The reason why we have net zero energy objectives in the state of California is so we can use our existing grid in order to power the electric vehicles that'll be there in the future. Now, from some of the tools that are out there that I feel are important, and maybe some of this hasn't been discussed, but in California, we've done a fantastic job in the last 30 years of using the public utilities to actually incentivize energy efficiency and provide that path forward by which we can look at the cost-benefit ratio and the avoided cost of building power plants, adding additional electrical infrastructure that might be required. I realize that this isn't the solution for all entities that are out there or countries, because in California, we're continuing to grow in population, whereas we have other states and countries around the world that are maybe decreasing in population, where the investment is not going to be in new power plants or new infrastructure with the energy efficiency savings. And so we have to look at some of this as a cost-benefit analysis. I do understand also the challenge that you have right now with the unemployment rate in Greece and with the recession. In the United States, our unemployment rate is not nearly as critical as it is here in Greece. Our annual average right now is 7.3%. The engineering unemployment rate in the United States right now is below 2%. In most cases, most engineers that are graduating have no problem finding a job in the engineering community, strictly because we have more engineers that are retiring today than we have coming out of the schools. If anything, I would like to see better education by the engineering community to the primary schools on the benefits of becoming an engineer and the value it has to society as a whole to solve some of these important solutions as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I think that Mr. Peterson has pointed out an important issue. We should not expect the others to do what we can do ourselves. And this idea was put forward today to set up a platform open to all, including the CRES, can be very useful in this country. Florentos this morning was telling us about the simple ways to save energy. The same we heard from Professor Roulet earlier. He spoke about simple ways in which can help us save energy. So we're all here to listen to the audience. Maybe you have questions to Mrs. Trachte, to Professor Roulet, and Mr. Scartezzini. So we don't need to repeat what each of us has said throughout the day. So are there any questions on all these issues, and on the general issue or even on the details?
Ήθελα να ρωτήσω και τους δικούς μας αξιωματούχους και τους ξένους πώς γίνεται η επιλογή.
How, both Greeks and non-Greeks, how are the people who will build a project are selected? Is the only criterion the cost, the money that will be spent, or maybe also the cost of that it will entail throughout its life? We see projects being tendered by the state, and the only selection criterion is the lowest bidder. Nothing to do with the life cycle of the project and things like that. Is there any way to deal with this? Thank you very much. Who would like to answer this question? Maybe the president of the Hellenic Technical Chamber. Well, I will answer both as regards our ethics and our attitude, and at the level as regards what the reality. In Western civilization, especially in Europe, but also in the US, the most important thing for the technical community and for the community of professionals in the field of health and public safety used to be quality. So, for as long as production was at the epicenter of the very center of our interest, that was the consideration. But when the immaterial values of global banking became the center of our attention, we have moved away from production and from the values of European civilization. We have become a society which worships the financial indicators, and this has no relation to production or to everyday life or the living conditions and many other things like that. So, coming to your point, I will give you specific examples. A few months ago, an amendment was voted of the law for the cadastre. The technical evaluation was scrapped, and the only the technical bid was what remained. So the technical changes did not come about. We need a register where we can see who assigns to whom, what has each company undertaken. How can a municipality directly assign 30 projects to one person as if there was nobody else around? and the same in building projects. So, since there is no political will, because it is a political issue, clearly, if transparency is not the objective, if the will is not there to stop the party, because the party is going on even during this the period of crisis, it is just a bit smaller, things will not change. Apparently, we don't want to have credible inspection and mechanisms and checks. We do not wish to achieve the desired quality in design and building. In this country now everything is measured on the basis of the bids of finances. The proposed designs are miserable. When the discount is 80%, it is not possible to, it's not feasible to come up with a quality product. When the state is agreeing to such a situation without even credible inspections, this is the situation. We are the only country whereby we have different specifications for private sector projects and public sector projects. Thank you very much. This is this issue we had also discussed last year. It is the economic model, the production model in our field. And this is not new. This is not something that has emerged because of the crisis. It is something that existed long before, and it is maybe now time to change. And let me also add, I am sorry to say, I don't know how many architects were present in the room. I'm sorry that they were not here. And I'm sorry that the president of the Architects Association did not join us. I believe that all engineers, architects, civil engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, hydraulic engineers, all of the technical world, the people who work on buildings and in architecture should collaborate. And I was impressed a while ago while I was speaking to some of the participants, and I saw that this is lacking. It's very important, and here in Ashtray we try to promote this. We try to promote this collaboration, which is at the basis of the proper production model. We are all together in this. Otherwise, under the present circumstances, we cannot continue. Kostas Ballaras wanted to add something.
What we heard is very interesting. No doubt, Ashtray overall and the Hellenic chapter are trying very hard to deal with the issue. I have a brief answer to give to Mr. Hatzidakis. It's easier than you think. It's easier for such things to happen, and it's easier for us to check on those processes. I get the feeling nonetheless that what is in progress right now is changes. So especially when it comes to buildings, there are changes about to happen. When it comes to tools and means to achieve those goals and proceed with the changes, I believe that will happen. Things are gradually changing. The process is being simplified. We are going forward, and I'm sure that subsequently changes will come about in other sectors, but especially when it comes to buildings, we are changing the way in which we deal with the entire life cycle of the building, not just the start of the design, the study, but we also consider what will follow. This is what we're going to introduce in the daily reality of our work and our customers too. Off mic? No microphone.
Αυτό είναι η βάση.
Mr. Papadaniel says it's exactly like that, and this is the foundation for sustainable development. I believe Mr. Theophylactos wanted to take the floor, but please be brief. Yes, I will be very brief.
We spoke about the design part. The rules have changed by now. In the past, people were acting separately. Now, the designers are all together. Now, the problem is with the building. And the issue here is green procurement. In these cases, the designer has to provide for technologies and materials which are quite specialized and these very strange discounts of the order of 80 or 70 or 90% will cease, because we need specific materials according to the specifications. So I really believe in green procurements. I don't know how long it will take, but I believe that we will manage. We shall overcome. Well, let me come back to this model. I believe that architects and engineers, when I say engineers, I speak about everybody. The engineers design and the contractors build. So the models, that is where the model starts. So if we lay the foundations of such a model whereby the engineers design, set the specifications, and the contractors build, then we have made a first step towards a well-balanced model. And these models exist all around Europe, yes. Professor Roulet and Dr. Scartesini are here with us. Mr. Scartesini was here last year as well, and he is familiar with the Greek reality since then. So I would like to ask him to give us his views as he listens to this debate. Can you give us any advice about setting up a platform? I'm very much in favor of setting up such a platform. ASHRAE would very willingly help the creation of such a platform. We are at the disposal of all interested parties. So, Professor Scartesini, you have the floor.
Thank you. For sure, I would not dare to give advices, and I definitely appreciate to be invited twice here in Athens. I've both time last year and this year certainly learned a lot of things. First, through the presentation we show regarding the technical aspect, but also through the discussion we had also regarding the social and economical aspect. Sure, the situation you are facing in Greece and the situation we are lucky to have actually in Switzerland are so different. And this is certainly one reason I would not dare to give advices, but we have some chances. In Switzerland, one chance is, for example, to have engineering and architect society. This is a society which is not mixing together both type of education and training, but actually this is the society which is bringing together architects and engineers, civil engineers, mechanical engineers are also involved in this society. And I think you mentioned a platform. I think this is certainly the chance we have. There are not so many countries where even if I'm right, even in the US, for example, here apparently the architects association are separated from the engineers. And I think one thing which is necessary is maybe not to have such a national association, but to have some bodies or some structure or some whatever entities which bring the people together. First of all, because we are dealing with complexity in our society, complexity also in the building sector. Everything is getting more and more complex. And for sure, This was already said by ancient Greek. There is no truth coming from one person, and the truth today for building, for example, in society is coming through team. Teamwork is definitely necessary. And I believe this is also one reason why we have the chance in Switzerland to see more and more projects, not only building large infrastructure projects. I'm a member of SIA, the Swiss Engineering and Architect Society Award for Sustainability. This is one of the prize, actually, one of the highest budget for the society for this SIA prize. And I'm seeing over the years more and more projects which are having more and more maturity and where sustainability from the energy side, from the environmental side, society and economy are more and more rich and definitely more convincing in all these projects. So it's spreading over. And I think it's also spreading over because if you have a right teamwork, another important aspect is the knowledge-based design, the fact that society has to be based on innovation, knowledge. This is where science and the city has to build a dialogue in between them. Competition in this very competitive economic world also deals with innovation and the fact of promoting innovation, disseminating innovation in the practice, in the society is something which is definitely a must. And this is something that maybe we have the chance also to practice in our country. Then democracy. And I think if we look to the history I don't have to explain what democracy is in this country, who invented democracy many, many, many years ago. But even in the modern history, if you look to the evolution, when there have been either through evolution or revolution, bringing democracy, for example, to the world in the 18th century, on the American continent, on the European continent later, there were science, knowledge, and rationality was behind these. And I think that again, the fact of moving in a rational way for the environment, for the energy saving purposes, for the overall sustainability, also has to deal with a democratic process. And these take times, this needs discussions, this needs laws at the end. We know that democracy without no laws, like football cannot be played without rules and laws. So this is again a combined process that's for which we need to be rather patient. But again, as somebody said, this was one of our ministers. I want to learn to be patient, but I want to learn very quickly. So this is maybe something which is contradictory. But again, this is the way maybe we can build a platform.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ τον καθηγητή Σκαρτεζίνη. Μήπως κάποιος άλλος θα ήθελε να ρωτήσει επάνω σε αυτά τα θέματα?
Take the floor, ask a question. Are there any queries on those issues? I see.
Ευχαριστώ.
My
question
will be brief, or I think it will be very short. I am not so sure about who is the one to give me an answer, but then again, there is a new legislation here in Greece. And the previous speakers, or most of the panelists, have referred to the legislation. And NOC is actually a bill of law that keeps, or rather that rewards those buildings that have low energy consumption. We have been discussing a new coefficient, building coefficient for those buildings that do well in terms of energy. And there is a legislation that seems to be the equivalent of LEED. Many clients of mine come to me and they know I work on LEED and they ask me about how they are going to do this that way. And my response to them is, you know what? I wish someone could explain things to me because LEED certificates are not issued for residences, residential blocks. And right now in the States, the situation is different. In Greece, I can't really give a definite answer to my clients, and I also tell them I can't provide you with any certificates whenever I file for the permit, because that should be issued once the construction is complete. So what I'm driving at is this: we want to do something good, but even the authorities in Greece can't tell me how to go about my work. So what do I do here?
Το είπα και το πρωί στην πρωτομιλία.
Like I said in my morning address, I will try to put it elegantly. We have a very effective ministry for the environment and climate change, especially when it comes to urban and spatial planning. The ministry is very capable in providing answers. You can ask all questions and queries and they will come up with an answer. The ministry is treating and dealing with everything. It does everything. It just needs time for it to give you answers and give you solutions. So we sent a ready-made presidential decree to the ministry with regard to the building ID. It took the ministry 3 years for consultation to be over. We are hopeful about the ministry possibly getting things in place within 5 years on average. So this is how long it takes for it to be effective and efficient. And this is a positive estimate because you see the new regulation provides for approximately 20 ministerial decisions. And so there's need for so many. It will take on average 170 years for the ministry to get everything ready based on its average time. So in the meantime, expect more circulars. So I'm being very smart and I'm trying to be very nice. Vasily would like to take the floor. Let me add one thing, if I may. In the old days, whenever the legislation would allow for easy solutions, the authorities were never well posted and informed. That is, the authorities issuing permits. But as concerns what you said, madam, I think there's no problem whatsoever. Right now, licensing procedures are clear, and the building permits authority is there to just draft a plan, and then the auditors or inspectors will just check that. If you, for example, are ready to give a solution to your client, then I guess there will be no problem whatsoever. What's your problem? Don't you get the permits you want? Comment off mic. Ms. Karavasili says, are you concerned with the methodology and the reference that's being made to methodology? So I guess this is an issue. Yes, it's quite complex. We can't deal with that right now. I mean, we can't provide solutions. So let me say this, says Mr. Spridis. The new building regulation, or WOC in Greek, includes many articles. Article 25, for example. Just like I said this morning, if you try to interpret that, each and every one of us in this room will give a different interpretation and meaning to the Article 25. So the building authorities will turn to the ministry. The ministry has no answer, so we're stuck. That's it. And the Deputy Minister, Mr. Kalafadis, is touring Greece in order to provide explanations on other bills of law that have not come with the right presidential or ministerial decisions yet. So this is a joke, but we know it's going to be a joke eventually, and it's not going to work out. The gentleman in the back.
First of all, good evening. Thank you very much for organizing this event. I wanted to defend the architects in this regard. Yes, our president is not here, and we are sorry for that. But I am a member of the association and member of the Energy Committee and Energy Audit Committee. So we are here to get educated, as usual. And since I have also graduated in 1987 as Mr. Theophylaktos, I have also been working on renewable energy sources and climatic architecture. So I will start with these issues. And I will end with a proposal. So I wanted to speak about the honorable efforts that engineers make in their profession, and how can they continue, how can they be honorable when in the past 2 to 3 years I have not had an income more than 1,500 euro per year, and in the previous one 8,000. I cannot pay my social security anymore, but since 1987 I have been working with bioclimatic buildings. I have attended more than 100 conferences in Greece and abroad, speaking about lifelong education, and I cannot even pay the 400 euros so that I can be certified as an energy auditor, although I already am an energy auditor, as Mrs. Karavasili knows very well. So I have opted for an area on the islands. Maybe I got isolated. I enjoyed the degradation of the Greek rural areas. Maybe that was my mistake as well. I belong to LM, and so from what I know, there are 25,000 engineers. 33% of the engineers are in my situation. So my question, or rather my proposal. I have prepared a proposal in relation to this new property tax, the single property tax, which is going to be introduced. And in relation to the topic of the conference, the idea is that the property owners, which will have to pay this tax, could be exempted from the tax if they're able to make energy savings in their buildings. Accordingly, depending on the amount of their investment. So if somebody invests 5,000 euro on energy efficiency, the tax to be exempted from the tax for a number of years. This is a very interesting proposal. We should note it. Yes. I think there is one last question waiting to be asked. Good afternoon, good evening. First of all, let us congratulate the organizers of this conference, which is very interesting. We should also congratulate the speakers. A proposal to the organizers. These presentations were very interesting. So would it be possible to... by the way, this is the first conference which I attend where the time is kept, is respected. In Greece, this is never the case. So maybe the next conference should be organized in one room, and for each presentation to be 20 minutes and not 40 minutes. My name is Manos Dimitropoulos. I am a civil engineer. And I am a temporary energy auditor. We spoke about the ethics of engineers. In my view, any professional, irrespective of whether we have a crisis or not, have a specific attitude. Not everybody should be grouped together. Engineers are not all non-ethical or are too market-oriented there are engineers who are interested in doing their job well, and it would be fairer for us to separate the good professionals from the ones who do not do what they should do. Because I heard Mrs. Karavasili say, I think that she was a bit unfair on the engineers. She said that she expected the engineers to, the energy auditors who come in touch with the homeowners, to educate them. But you know that, Mrs. Karavasili, you know the fees that engineers earn these days. I was abroad for a couple of years. I was very lucky to be able to work in Paris. But an engineer going into a house to issue a certificate and the fees 80 or 150 euros, they cannot spend 2 hours speaking to the property owner. Nevertheless, we expect them to do their job properly. Mrs. Karavasili did not have enough time to speak to us about her agency, CISD. I was not aware of its Greek title. And I have a question also to Mr. Spirgis. He said this morning that the Technical Chamber of Greece, very rightly so, wishes to promote the new energy regulation, the new KENAC. But I heard someone say that they went to the ministry and the ministry told them, yes, proceed with the new KENAC. Yes, can you give me the time schedule, Mr. President? Because there are things moving in parallel. There are some there are some professions which are preparing a new energy regulation, and others who are doing different things. And lastly, Mr. Spirtis again said that the new laws 4178, as we all know, is going to be judged not anti-constitutional. This is a major issue. Very important issue.
I think that we are somehow digressing, and it's besides the point. Your questions were, but then again, Ms. Karavasili, I'll be very brief, says Ms. Karavasili. First of all, pray forgive me. I tend to generalize, and I think that generally speaking, we tend to generalize, and it's true. We ought to acknowledge that there have been engineers and peers of ours that have worked real hard, and they've put the heart and soul into our business. But I also know that people are disappointed, and I also am aware of the fact that the fees have dropped and the prices are dropping. The Troika asked us to do so. We had to, so we were unable to keep the prices at a reasonable level, and it was to be expected that problems would emerge. I hope that somehow these problems will be phased out as time goes by. Now, when it comes to CISD, it's the Citizens Inspectorate for Sustainable Development. Since you said you've never heard of that, it is an institution which, like I've said before, is there to check up on what the administration is doing, and we intervene to the extent that we can intervene. Now, since you raise the issue of possibly having an agency or a body, I think you referred to insulation, right? You said that there was a conference and a reference was made to an upcoming study. I heard about that too, and I was really yes, this association, like you said, right. I'm aware of the fact that they are offering free of charge studies and surveys to the ministry, and it's true that the ministry is a year ago. But then again, the minister was happy and said, okay, if it's free of charge, just give it to us and we're going to put it up for consultation. I know Mr. Spritis has something to say on that, but I believe that this is not the right way to act. It's like you're begging and asking for just about anything. To me, it is important to have specs and criteria and choose the fittest. Mr. Spritsis, will you be brief?
I have a friend who imports glass. I will ask him to prepare a new energy regulation to promote his own imported type of glass. I have another friend who is dealing with the so-called cold materials, another myth. Anyway, all of us would like to promote some things with a new regulation. Our regulation, the one we have prepared, does not promote anything other than Greek products, domestic production. This is quite a different thing. And specific people should not be promoted, should not benefit. The second thing is the time issue. We would have started already. For 10 months, we have been working without an approved budget. I expect that after the election, that is in 2 weeks' time, the newly elected committee will decide. And as far as congratulating the organizers for keeping with the time, yes, I would like to congratulate them as well, and even more so because I was participating in the process, and wherever I am a participant, I mess up with the time. So I would now like to give the floor to Professor Roulet, but before that, Dimitris will take the floor. Microphone. No, the microphone is okay. I would like us to discuss different things next year, so that is why I would like to ask both the President of the Technical Chamber and Mr. Peterson how an engineer can impact on the reactions of society, and to ask our guests how do they deal with these issues in Switzerland and in Egypt. I have heard a minister say on camera, what can the minister do? So how are things else in other countries? Are engineers able to influence decision making? What is happening in the United States? Does the ASHRAE impact on the policies related to engineers?
Maybe Professor Roulet should go first, and then we give the floor to the rest of our guests.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for the committee for having invited me. I'm very happy to be there. You ask what happened in Switzerland if the engineers can influence the ministers. I would say yes. In our country, the SIA, for example, the Society of Architects and Engineers, often discuss with, maybe not directly, it's seldom directly discussing with minister, but it happens, but often discuss with state secretaries and office bosses in the Swiss government to propose things. And let me go back 35 years when Switzerland was in an economical crisis after the second oil shock. And at that time, it was proposed to take economic measures. And the government had heard that and started what they call an impulse program, spending money to promote building energy retrofit, saying, well, when we do building energy retrofit, we get energy saving and we create jobs. And this project was a pretty big project for that time in '78, and it included measure to
clarify the market, comparative tests of products and machines and heat pumps and furnaces. At that time, the characteristics of this thing were not that clear. And most important for me, many courses to professional, which is, it was 1 or 2 day courses to tell them how to, in their domain, improve energy retrofit. For architects, they learn how to make a thermal balance. For carpenter, how to install thermal installation. They didn't know that at the time, and so on. And we reached that time thousands of professionals. And in this program, engineers were very important because they had to write the books for the courses, and it was a big interaction between the engineers and the government to organize this program, helping Switzerland to go out of the crisis at that time. I don't know if this can be translated into Greece, but well, I asked to speak, and it was the idea I had. Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Mr. Peterson.
I can provide a perspective in the United States. We definitely do things a little bit differently. The engineering community in the United States does have a very good advocacy program where our different technical societies will work together to advocate for engineering type solutions. The second thing that really is different is that most of our regulations come from consensus-based standards. And those consensus-based standards are usually coming from professional societies or NGOs that are out there that are developing things like ASHRAE Standard 90.1 would be a good example. That serves as the federal energy code within the United States. And when they rely heavily on the industry with the engineering community, the construction community, the building owners, all working together to work out what the proper solutions are so they don't simply get a small group of people and say, write this regulation, and this regulation is going to be the new regulations.
Thank you very much. Θα ήθελα να κάνω ένα μικρό συμπλήρωμα πριν δώσω το λόγο στον καθηγητή που έρχεται.
Yet another guest of ours who comes from Egypt, and he comes from a country which actually has been faced with significant issues for quite a while. So let me also introduce this feature, if you will. Greece, since the start of the crisis, that is, since 2008 or 2009, has been using less energy, significantly. The same has happened in Portugal. We've cut down on energy usage by 8% on average, Portugal by 4%. There is, of course, this is a repercussion of the crisis, but, well, it's happening. I'm not suggesting this is the right thing to do, but it's true. It is important to note that now, today, amidst all the things we've raised and all the issues,
speak about your impressions of the Today Congress and your position like Egyptian academician.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I am actually impressed and thankful for the arrangement of the meeting today. I think we kept on time. The diversity and the very colorful presentations we had is something that's great. I and my colleague, Professor Fouad, we work at Cairo University. I'm the chairman of the Energy Code and Standards for Egypt and the Arab countries. And we have the same problem, exactly. We also have the same problem with the ethics of practicing engineering. And I think it will be solved by time. But we have to be dedicated. We have to stand for our rights as designers and also as energy auditors. We shouldn't accept low fees for our job. It is very important. But we must have a legislation. We must have a that sets out our fees, our qualification, because not anyone can be an energy auditor. Must be certificates, And I think the role of ASHRAE and the Technical Engineering Association of Greece is to develop the capabilities of the individuals to be really energy auditors. It's very important. I see it's coming. We have to have energy auditors. We have to teach our graduates how to do energy conservation, renewable energies, and it's not commodity, it's a necessity now. Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Νομίζω ότι έχουμε εξαντλήσει όλα τα όρια. Πλέον είμαστε εδώ από τις 7 το πρωί.
It's been a long day for everyone. Some of us have been here since 7 in the morning. And on that note, let me thank each and every one of you for your interest, for attending this conference, for the questions. And I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you next year. And hopefully next year we will be able to have an Energy in Buildings conference yet again. And hopefully this concept will be more dynamic. Let me thank all the speakers, all the panelists. Let me thank our distinguished guests who flew in from abroad, from quite a distance, some of them. Let me thank all the members to the roundtable and especially the president of the technical chamber. Have a great evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.